the claim that I'm going to respond to is the claim, cell phone use caused lower levels of concentration and focus. My opponent's secondary claims are as follows. Cell phone use is disrupting human bonding and intimacy. 2, the conveniences of cell phones are creating compelling social problems. And cell phones are significantly impacting cause of distraction. The first secondary claim states that cell phone use is disrupting human bonding and intimacy. This claim is irrelevant support for their major claim, which is cell phone use causes lower levels of concentration and focus, as the link between levels of focus and human bonding and intimacy are not addressed, and seem unrelated as well as far-fetched. They fail to provide a strong cause and effect relationship, link, or any factual data to support this claim. And even if the link was shown, Pew Research Center found that 2/3 or 65% of cell phone owners say that mobile phones have made it a lot easier to stay in touch with the people they care about, while just 6% say that their phone has not improved their connections with friends and family at all. In the secondary claim states that the conveniences of cell phones are creating compelling social problems, and they provide the evidence in support. 54% of adolescents reported knowing someone who sent a text. This information provided adds not only confusion, but brings the validity of the evidence in question when no connection is made. The arguer also fails to address what this data is even referring to or what impact it even has. Another problem I encountered was the intended meaning of compelling social problems and how the unknown meaning related to the main claim, which is cell phone use causes lower levels of concentration and distraction and focus. They also say that in regard to the conveniences of cell phones are creating compelling social problems, a support for that, they say, is sex exploration among teens. And I find this irrelevant as there is lack of proof or indication that this is in fact a strong or significant cause of the compelling social problem, as this seems more of an ethical problem, not a, yeah, it's an ethical problem. In the third claim, the cell phones are significantly impacting cause of distraction. That is just a reiteration of the person's major claim, just worded differently, or in other words, begging the question. The major claim is cell phone use causes lower levels of concentration and focus, and the third secondary claim is that cell phones are significantly impacting cause of distraction. And even then, the Pew Research Center found that 73% of advanced placement and national writing project teachers said their students use phones in classrooms or to complete assignments, according to a Pew Research Center study. Yeah. That's it.
All right, organizationally, everything's pretty good. You signpost well as you go through the presentation. The first point is an argument about relevance, since it's an illustration about how important it is to phrase your main proposition correctly and to make sure that the secondary claims are directly related to that particular claim. I can see why your criticism seems valid, and I would be a little, I could see that you could put your kind of, your trust in that as an argument, although I do think that it's perhaps a little bit shaky. But what I appreciated most on that first point is that you kind of concede the notion that even if it isn't shaky, there's a good reason to reject the claim. And we're going to be talking about this issue in just a few minutes. It's a concept called the burden of rebuttal. And if you simply try and dismiss something as being irrelevant, if it doesn't appear to be irrelevant in the eyes of the listeners, then you're going to have a problem. If you didn't offer any other response. And like I said, I thought that that's what was going to happen here, but as it turns out, you did offer some information that suggests a contrary conclusion. Even if you don't see that point as being relevant to the main claim, you still contradict the secondary claim and give us reason to doubt their argument on that first point. I do think that you could also maybe ask a little bit about the reasoning and evidence that the advocate used and whether or not their proof was adequate. You gave a good piece of counter information on that point, but I have no way to contrast it with what the advocate talked about. On the second point, I think you're making good use of the notion that the argument has to be relatively clear, and your suggestion here is that the way the evidence was cited doesn't really clarify what inference we're supposed to draw from it and what it all means in the long run. You do challenge the notion that these are compelling social problems. Your argument, I guess primarily about, I don't know if it's sexting or sexploitation or something else by the teens, you basically said there's a lack of proof, and it sounds like it's an ethical issue as opposed to something that's more practical. I suppose that's the case, and if the advocate didn't provide any information on this, that would be a pretty legitimate challenge there. Once again, although I think like on the first point, it would have been good to have some kind of counterclaim just in case. On the third argument, I think you are correct in basically saying it's a reiteration of the first point. But if the first and second points, for instance, had just been broken down into secondary points that said, we're doing part A and part B, that would be okay. Because it's combined in this one, I can see that it does sound a little bit repetitive. And your argument here about how students use it in the classroom, I'm not sure that it is as applicable to the advocate's claim on this point. It's definitely a good counterpoint, but I don't know that it denies what the advocate said on this point. And since there's no reference to the advocate's evidence or reasoning on this point, that makes it a little bit hard to contrast. I do think you could use a little bit more summary, and yeah, that's it is a terrible exit line. All right.